So uh, we did a worship planning retreat back in August where we kind of laid out all the themes for the year. And we did some devotional things as part of that. And I shared a story with the group that was there that actually led to the idea for this worship series today. And years ago, I was blessed to take a class with Bishop Judy Craig, who was actually the second female bishop in the United Methodist Church. From back in the day. She, at that point, had been long since retired, and she was leading this class on spirituality. And I thought, that's something I should probably have. And it wasn't feeling like I had a lot of spirituality at the time, because it all felt a little too touchy and feely for this very recent software engineer. But I really liked Bishop Craig. She taught my leadership classes, so I said I would go. And one of the exercises she had us do as part of that was this sort of visualization, where she read a scene from the scripture. I believe it was Jesus calming the waters when all the disciples were freaking out because of the storm. And she invited us to sit and visualize ourselves in that scene and really picture in our mind what that looked like. And then she asked us to go around and share who we were in the scene. I'm not going to do that to you. Okay. And as she went around, I was really grateful that, one, she didn't ask me first, but as other people began to share, I got more and more nervous and not sure what to say, because most everybody else said that they pictured themselves as one of the disciples in the boat, right? Or they pictured themselves on the shore, watching all of this happen, and they talked about that experience. What I quickly realized is that I was the only one in the room that had pictured himself as Jesus, which may tell you more than you want to know, or I want you to know, about me and who I am. And I will confess, I chickened out and did not tell those people that that's what I had thought, because the last thing, pastors are accused plenty of times of having Messiah complexes already, didn't need to reinforce that. But I remember the experience of it and how it changed it to really actually picture the scene in my mind in a way that I don't typically do, and I don't think most people do when they're just hearing the story read. So that's what we're going to do, and for Lent, is we're going to explore. Some of these will be pretty familiar stories, some of them will be different, and then we're going to go through and look at who all the characters in that scene is. Well, not all the characters, but we're going to highlight a couple of them because it's also really easy to focus in on one or the other and not recognize that each and every person in that room, each and every person in that story has their own story and their own perspective on what is going on. And it is really helpful sometimes to put ourselves in the position of trying to see things through somebody else's perspective. Sometimes those people then become more sympathetic, and sometimes they don't. So, today's story is one of the 2 times we have recorded of Jesus having somebody come and wash his feet. Now, as my wife deftly wrote into the children's message, this was actually not an uncommon practice. In fact, it was a common practice at the time to do this because, it's the desert and it's dirty and people walk around in sandals the whole time. And so when you entered somebody's home, especially before eating, you would, clean yourself. And Jews of Jesus's day had a lot of different rituals and a lot of different rules about how and when they should clean and wash their hands and all those sorts of things needed to be done in a way. But one thing that was shared kind of culturally throughout was this idea is if you have guests in your home, it's hospitable to make sure that either you wash their feet or you have a servant do it or you provide them with that opportunity. I know it sounds really weird to us, and none of us want to do that. Don't worry, if you ever get invited to my house, I'm not going to try to wash your feet. Oh, well, if you want, Jim, I'm not saying no. All right. So that is actually not the untypical part. The fact that happened would have been common practice and everybody would have had an experience of that. How it happens is different. Now, Jesus was invited to eat at the house of a Pharisee. He had just been teaching a large group about John the Baptist, talking about John the Baptist's work. And this Pharisee had come to listen to what he had to say, and then invited him back to his place for lunch. And obviously not alone. We hear at the end of the passage that there were other people at this lunch as well. No doubt this guy, who would have been the local religious leader in the area, is curious about who this Jesus is and wants the opportunity to hear him a little bit more. So he invites him into his home, which again also would have been a standard thing. There wasn't a McDonald's in every corner back then. So if you were traveling, the way that you kind of subsisted is people would invite you into their house. And the idea is when you travel, other people invite you into their house, and then when other people come down, you invite them in, right? So somebody was going to feed Jesus, thankfully. But in this case, it happens as a guy named Simon, who again is the Pharisee, or the local religious leader in that community. So he's there, and Jesus doesn't say anything at the time, but he obviously fails in his duty to be hospitable to Jesus. And then this woman comes. Now, we're not exactly sure where this is. Scripture doesn't say where it is, but this was kind of during Jesus' kind of road show, where he was traveling to all these different towns and villages. And no doubt this woman, probably, we don't know who she was before this, but is obviously responding to something. She has some idea who Jesus is. She's obviously heard her teachings, or his teachings at some point. So she's responding to that and wants to express her gratitude and her hospitality. She's probably from the area, and obviously Simon the Pharisee knows who she is. So she's not only that, but she's known to the area and obviously carries with her a certain reputation, which is to say, not good. From Simon's perspective, he's looking at this and wondering what is going on. Why is Jesus, if he is supposed to be this big, important prophet, allowing this thing to happen? The woman doesn't really seem to care at all about what Simon thinks. From her perspective, she sees an opportunity to show her gratitude to somebody who she's grateful for. She never says anything. She never asks for anything. She just comes and serves. We know that Simon is important because one of the ways we can usually tell if somebody's important in the Bible is they have a name. So we're told what Simon's name is. So we know that he is an important figure, at least somebody of status, somebody who's being exalted, as you will, in the city. The woman is not given a name, and that's intentional, because what they want us to know as the reader is she is someone who is not being exalted. She has been brought low. She is somebody that people do not think much or respect much. And then all we're told at the end of the day is that she is a sinner. That could mean anything, right? And it was really easy, especially in the eyes of a Pharisee. So the Pharisees are the keeper of the rules, like 600 some rules about the different things you're supposed to do and when you're supposed to do them, right? And if you fall in violation of any of those, they will consider you a sinner. So it was really easy. Like, we think sinning's easy today. It was really easy. Oh, come on. You're all perfect, I know. So it could have been any number of things back then that got her into this position. Sometimes people are labeled as that just simply because their profession and their jobs require them to do things that the rules say they do not do. It's one of the reasons the shepherds are so poorly thought of, is because the shepherds don't have a choice but to work on the Sabbath. They have to work on the Sabbath because the wolves don't take Sabbath off. Right? They still have to protect the sheep. But because of that, they're often thought of very, very poorly in the community because they are not able to follow all the rules. So what kind of sinner she was, we don't know, and it's obviously not important to the story, and we are allowed to sort of read into that whatever we want. So Simon has his perspective on it. The woman has her perspective on it. And then, of course, Jesus, who sees more than either one of them, see something entirely different. Now, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, this woman and this character, and obviously she has a lot of challenges in her life and a lot of things that she needs to overcome and a lot of things that the community is putting on her and is not thought of well in it, and she's trying to overcome all of that. All right. When I was thinking about this, I actually remember a story I read a while ago about a woman named Wilma. Now, Wilma was actually born, here she is, in 1940. She's the 20th of 22 children. One mom, or one dad, two moms. So, still, that's a lot. And her dad was not particularly well off, and in fact, none of them were particularly well off. And when Wilma was born, she was actually born premature, so she was only 4.5 pounds when she was born. Over the course of in the first couple years of her life, she contracted scarlet fever, because that used to be a thing. She contracted polio, because that used to be a thing, and was left basically paralyzed on one of her left feet. Nobody expected her to do much with her life. Nobody would have thought or blamed her if she hadn't. This is not the kind of beginning to life, right? This is not the kind of situation that sets you up, we would think, for success. As it happens, though, Wilma and her mom had some other ideas. So one of the things that they did is her mom and her would travel by train or by bus 50 miles each way every Friday for her to get physical therapy on her foot. And she was, over time, able to regain the muscle in her foot, and she was able to walk even though they thought she would never walk. And not only did she learn how to walk, she discovered that she had a real passion, not just for walking, but for running, which in my mind is weird. I don't know why anyone would do that. I don't know why some people think it's fun, but some people do. Okay. Not only was she able to regain that, and not only did she discover a passion for it, only 16 years after she was born, in 1956, she would actually compete in the Olympics. And in 1956, she qualified for 3 events and brought home a bronze medal as part of the 4x100 relay team. Now, if you're a junior in high school and you get to bring a bronze medal home from the Olympics, that's pretty cool, right? And so here she was, this poor person that nobody ever would have expected from, running and representing her country, getting a trip to Australia to do it at the time, and then coming home with a medal to, I'm sure, show all of her friends. She wasn't done there, though, and decided to try to compete again in 1960, and she did. And at that Olympics, she actually won all 3 of her events, got gold medals in all 3 events, and it was actually the first U.S. woman athlete to win 3 medals in one Olympics. A lot of people do that a lot now, but it was actually very, very uncommon at the time for somebody to be able to be that good at that many different events. After all this was done, obviously, she was quite well known for a while, but as you might imagine, being an amateur athlete does not pay much money. So when she went home, she actually finished her degree in education, went back and taught at the same elementary school where she had been taught, and of course, coached track at the same high school where she had run herself. She has a couple of great quotes, and there's one that really stuck with me. She said in one of her interviews, "My doctor told me I would never walk. My mother told me I would. I believed my mother." There's another one too. She says, "Winning is great, sure, but if you really going to do something in life, the secret is learning how to lose." I love this story, and I love this idea, and I love that she credits what she did to her belief and who it is that she chose to believe. That is the decision. The decision to believe what her mom was saying and not what the doctor was saying was the most important decision she made, and it made everything that came after it possible. What we believe about ourselves and what we believe about what people are telling us about ourselves matters. It matters a lot. The community had been telling this woman, probably her entire life, that she was a sinner. Jesus came to town and told her something different. She comes to wash his feet because she chooses to believe what Jesus said and believe what Jesus is telling her about herself, that she is more than just a sinner. Simon doesn't know yet what to believe. My belief is he's curious and trying to find out, which is why he invites Jesus over in the first place. I love this story because it reminds us of that. I love the story because it reminds us to think about what we believe about ourselves. Where do we believe we belong in the story? Sometimes we probably want to be the woman. We want to see and accept the love and the grace that we are offered, and we want to be so grateful for it that we will defy convention to show our gratitude. Most of us, and certainly myself included, probably spend a lot more time being like Simon. Taking a step back, really seeing what's going on, being very cautious about what am I choosing here? Do I want to get involved with this guy? Is this guy nuts? What's happening? And I love that this story ends because we read the whole thing. It just ends. And Simon doesn't come back, and the woman doesn't come back. We don't know what happens to them. I would like to believe that after Jesus was gone, they chose to accept her more than they did before, but my gut tells me that's probably not what happened. The big difference between these two, the perspective of these two, is the woman doesn't feel like she has anything to lose, and Simon's not sure that there's anything for him to gain. Simon is clearly more concerned about losing his status as a religious leader, more concerned about what he might stand to lose in following and listening to this Jesus guy, when the woman is only focusing on what it is that she could gain. Most of us do not enjoy the experience of losing something, right? Big or little, we really don't like loss. We do our best to avoid it. The other day, it was very, very cold, and the ring I wear on this finger actually slipped off in between like the car seat and the console in my car, and I haven't been able to find it, and it's driving me nuts, right? Because it's the thing it's not there, right? I am reminded constantly that I have lost something, and it's driving me crazy, and it's a little thing, and it doesn't actually really matter. Simon is worried about losing big things. The woman is trying to gain big things. So this season of Lent, I think we are given an opportunity every time we go through this. This is a time of preparation. It is a time where we prepare our hearts and our minds for what is to come. And we know at the end of this road what is coming. At the end of the day, this will lead to Easter and an empty tomb. And we also know the story that gets us there is not simple and is not clean and is hard and challenging. This Lent, let us try to consider, when we are given opportunities, when things come forward, when people come into our lives, when things happen in our work or at home, let's try to consider how often it is that we are worrying about what we might lose, and then consider what it might be to think about what we might gain. We all try to avoid loss. That's not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing to be protective of ourselves and our loved ones and what we have. But when it gets to the point that we are being so protective of what it is that we have, that we are unable then to take the opportunities that are presented to us to gain more, then we've got a problem. Jesus came to teach us something important about ourselves. He wants us to learn the same thing he wanted the woman who washing his feet to learn, that we are more to him and more to God than we can believe. We are not simple sinners. We are not to be discarded. Nobody is. Jesus came for the least and the last. And so if he came for them, he surely came for us too. So let us consider this Lent what it is that we have to gain, what it is that we might get by learning to trust Jesus a little bit more and choosing to believe about ourselves what we know he believes about us. Amen.